In Fyodor Dostoevsky's 1866 novel Crime and Punishment, protagonist Rodion Raskolnikov, in an attempt to justify his actions prior to the brutal murder of a pawnbroker and her sister, writes an article titled On Crime, wherein he divides humanity into two categories: ordinary and extraordinary. Raskolnikov argues that the world is made up of those who must follow the law, the ordinary ones, and those who are justified in breaking it, the extraordinary ones. The extraordinary individual is evidently small in number when compared to the rest of humanity, however their impact on the world is far greater. Extraordinary people push forward the human race through their innovation, daring and genius. They're simply allowed to rid themselves of the law, as their actions will result in a better future for the world. Sitting at his desk, mulling over the many justifications for getting rid of a greedy, useless and rude pawnbroker, Raskolnikov came to think of himself as being in the extraordinary category, and therefore thought himself justified in the actions he was about to commit. With this in mind, he walked to the house of the pawnbroker and killed her with an axe. Her sister, an unexpected witness, was killed too. The then extraordinary Rodion Raskolnikov fled back to his tiny apartment and collapsed into a deep sleep. Anyone with an interest in literature knows how this story goes. Raskolnikov eventually breaks and confesses to the murder of both the pawnbroker and her sister. During his confession, Raskolnikov states that he wanted to be like Napoleon Bonaparte. His killing of the pawnbroker was a way to do so, as her murder was supposed to be a justified overruling of the law in the conquest of a greater good. However, what transpired was nothing but guilt and a mental collapse. Raskolnikov had discovered that he was just an ordinary man. One of our favourite descriptors to bestow on high achievers is that of greatness. Whether that greatness be attributable to sport, art, war or anything else, greatness tends to find its way into those who transcend the cap of previous men or women's capabilities. These greats are applauded, awarded statues, and sometimes even have days dedicated to them. Greatness, however, has no concrete definition. Despite the objective agreement of greats in our history, Alexander the Great being a good example, the list of traits a man or woman needs to garner such a reputation is somewhat blurred. There is something about those greats who almost don't seem real. Their accomplishments are such that the mere thought of their existence is hard to comprehend. I believe this subjective sensation to overrule the objective criteria of achievements needed to be deemed one of the greats. In my opinion, we venerate figures of history with greatness due to their story. A great is an embodiment of humanity into one organism. Humble beginnings, ambition, romance, triumph, decline, redemption, and death. History favours these people. It is not about good or bad, but an assessment of where they were to where they got. Greatness is delusional ambition actualized in a romantic narrative, in my opinion of course. But there are trade-offs. The romanticism of heroes and hero worshipping continually leads people to questionable conclusions, Raskolnikov being a good example of this. Additionally, the lives of these greats tend not to be as desirable as we may believe them to be. To want to be a great automatically places you in the position of want for something entirely supplied by other people. In pursuit of this, or even when caught, the greatness men or women crave may absorb their daily life and be spurred on by unhealthy motivations. Despite this, people do achieve greatness, and we celebrate them for doing so. We are enamored by the greats, yet not all of us are willing to go to the lengths needed to become one ourselves. It is this formless, subjective, and sometimes destructive view of greatness that I want to elaborate on in this video. One man who is the embodiment of greatness, keep in mind greatness does not necessarily mean good, is Napoleon Bonaparte. When researching for this video, every Google search with the word greatness produced a photograph of Napoleon. Additionally, I found an article by Time magazine titled "Who's Biggest? The 100 Most Significant Figures in History," and Napoleon came second. Number 1 was Jesus Christ. And so, when discussing the meaning of greatness, what makes greatness, why people chase it, the theories associated with it, and lastly, the potential detriments of being a great, Napoleon will be my continual through line. So let's begin. If you were to type greatness definition Oxford into Google and scroll to the top link, at least the last time I checked, you would be given two meanings behind the term. 1, the fact of having high status or a lot of influence, or 2, the quality of being extremely good in ability or quality and therefore admired by many people. Now, I am not the type to rally against those evidently smarter and more capable than I am. However, is it just me that thinks this simply isn't the definition of greatness? Think about it. If you were to apply those two definitions to someone, would it automatically churn out a great as we know them? Personally, I don't think so. For example, those two definitions may be applicable to Napoleon, but the definition of greatness doesn't do as much justice as just saying Napoleon's name would do to the word greatness. Even those unaware of the details of Napoleon's life are aware of his greatness. Due to this, I believe greatness to be a pervasion of personality rather than an objective metric achieved by one person, as the definition suggests. But before we go into the nitty-gritty, let's think more broadly about greatness. Greatness can appear in all shapes and sizes. By this I mean you can be a great at literally anything. A great writer, a great painter, great businessman, great sportsman, great conqueror, etc. If we were to grab 3 examples from Google of people who reached greatness within these fields, writing, painting, business, sports, conquering, we would be given these names. Writing, James Joyce, William Shakespeare, George Orwell. Painting, Pablo Picasso, Leonardo da Vinci, Vincent van Gogh. Business, Steve Jobs, Henry Ford, Andrew Carnegie. Sports, Muhammad Ali, Roger Federer, Michael Jordan. Conquerors, Alexander the Great, Genghis Khan, and Napoleon Bonaparte. These names are just what I got on Google when I typed in the category prefaced by great. Not greatest, just great. For sports, I even put sports people, and the names mentioned are the ones that showed up. Apparently, these lot are top of the pile. Within this collection of names, the shapes and sizes of greatness is shown in their full spectrum. This spectrum of greatness can be in narrow niche interests, or extend to broader world affairs with larger implications on the population as a result. Those whose greatness extends to those triumphs that determine life and death, leaders and/or conquerors, sometimes they're the same thing, are more broadly defined as great. Muhammad Ali, for example, was a great boxer, but as a historical figure, it goes without saying that he would be trumped by Napoleon, who, as previously mentioned, embodies greatness itself. Despite this, both men, and the other people listed above, are all connected through their greatness. What delineates the level of greatness from these people is the extent to which the thing they were great at impacted history. Those involved in world affairs will always trump the rest in regards to their importance. Thus, whilst greatness may appear subjective, it is objective to some degree, that being the significance of that greatness, and ultimately, how that greatness impacted humanity. In 1841, Scotland-born essayist and historian Thomas Carlyle published On Heroes, Hero Worship, and the Heroic in History, in which was born what we deem the Great Man Theory. Much like Raskolnikov's article, the Great Man Theory posits that there are 2 types of people in the world, those who are great and those who are not great. The former men or women are the drivers of humanity, whereas the latter are people merely along for the ride. According to Carlyle, society needs great men or women in order to evolve, for without them, us ordinary folk would be stuck floundering in stagnation until the end of time. Great men and or women are thought to be natural born leaders destined for the greatness they achieve. In achieving this greatness, we all benefit, even if some ordinary men or women get killed along the way. Just forget about that. When talking of greatness within On Heroes, Hero Worship, and the Heroic in History, Carlyle was speaking to those historical figures whose influence and impact are felt the most. For, as I take it, universal history, the history of what man has accomplished in this world, is at bottom the history of the great men who have worked here. They were the leaders of men, these great ones, the modelers, patterns, and in a wide sense creators, of whatsoever the general mass of men contrive to do or to attain. All things that we see standing accomplished in the world are properly the outer material result, the practical realization and embodiment of thoughts that dwelt in the great men sent into the world, the soul of the whole world's history. It may justly be considered with the history of these. The Great Man Theory is, to the best of my knowledge, a widely disregarded view of history. Greats, such as Napoleon for example, undoubtedly had an impact on the world. In fact, Napoleon reformed the legal system in France with the Napoleonic Code, as well as allowing education to be accessed from people of all backgrounds. These 2 changes, among many, are still influencing France and the world today. However, to suggest everyone else is merely a cog being spun by Napoleon would be a vast mistake. It goes without saying that there are many unsung heroes who play little roles in great men or women's lives, which help spur on the larger players in the game. No man is an island, as they say, and so these greats, no matter how self-sufficient they may seem, should not be treated as such. In June 1791, Napoleon entered a writing contest wherein the participants were to write an essay answering the question, what are the truths and feelings that should be inculcated in men for their greatest happiness? Napoleon did not win this contest, and according to Napoleon.org, His shame at having his essay be described as mediocre was such that, once made emperor, he ordered for all copies to be destroyed. Unfortunately for him, some copies slipped through the cracks. Within the essay, Napoleon touched on the subject of ambition, to which he described as a disordered passion, and a fire fed by a pitiless wind. It only burns out after having consumed everything in its path. This quote accurately predestines Napoleon's own fate, but more so the unrelenting need for more that ravages those who chase the highest of highs in their field. Greatness is not a fun path to follow. Greatness is isolating, all-consuming, antisocial, and obsessive. However, others would argue the fruits of such labour to be worth the strain. Often these fruits are far flung into the future, encased in the thoughts and opinions of those who will decide the man or woman's legacy. Ironically, it is the ordinary collective who determine who and what is great, not the extraordinary, if decided to be so, men or women themselves. As well as this, greatness is often an afterthought. Rarely do we comprehend the greatness within the present. Alexander the Great was given the epithet the Great after his death. Napoleon was only universally referred to as great in historical documents. And even those few mentioned above as greats, bar Muhammad Ali, whose nickname was literally the greatest, were only given their flowers years following their departure from the world. It begs the question, is it better to live comfortably and die forgotten, or strain in life and be remembered forever after? There is no correct answer. To some, legacy and immortality are the ultimate goal, whereas for others, the present desire for a stress-free, anonymous life trumps the need for recognition. The former would think the latter stupid for being unambitious, the latter would think the former stupid for being concerned with the thoughts of others. Michel de Montaigne, a philosopher who lived between 1533 to 1592, he is known for practically inventing the essay format, wrote an essay titled The Inconvenience of Greatness, wherein he spoke of his personal lack of interest in power, prestige, and riches, insinuating that those who chased those tokens were feeling a lack of love for themselves. I incite my courage to patience, but I rein it as much as I can towards desire. I have as much to wish for as another, and allow my wishes as much liberty and indiscretion, but yet it never befell me to wish for either empire or royalty, or the eminency of those high and commanding fortunes. I do not aim that way. I love myself too well. Napoleon's early life was tragic. Frequently outcasted and bullied, Napoleon took a heavy resentment into his ambitions. The desire to prove the haters wrong, as they say nowadays, was strong within him. Sometimes a strong ambition is more about running away from something than running towards something. Montaigne understood the gaping hole present within those who go to the extremes of ambition. He believed these quests for greatness to be covering up inner thoughts of inadequacy. And whilst this can be done briefly through external validation, eventually we all have to live with ourselves, and by proxy, our thoughts concerning who we are. As aforementioned, I believe our determination of greatness to rely more on the story than what actually made them great in the first place. Allow me to explain. The act of getting from A representing a humble beginning of some sort, to B, fame, fortune, and prestige, inspires us more because it is more relatable. The further the stretch from A to B, the more the likelihood that we will consider them a great. I am not saying the achievements, however, are wholly disregarded. Evidently, you need to achieve and achieve big to be considered a great. However, the process you undertook and what that process inspires via its narrative inspires the great description. Otherwise, it's just high achievement. It's not greatness. You have to have two. You have to have both of them. You can't just have one or the other. When Napoleon had been exiled to the island of St. Helena in October 1815 following his defeat in June 1815 at the Battle of Waterloo, he had been exiled with French author Emmanuel Comte de la Caze, who recorded the two men's conversation during the first 18 months of Napoleon's exile. In 1823, Emmanuel published his conversations with Napoleon in the book The Memorial of St. Helena. Within this book, Emmanuel claims that when reflecting on his life, Napoleon claimed that his life was like a novel. Whether or not Napoleon truly said this, the fact remains that his life was indeed like a novel. It was this narrative of Napoleon's life that further cements his greatness in our eyes. His A to B was a huge leap. The man, if anything, went from A to Z. For Napoleon to go from the child of low nobility to emperor and then to owning almost all of Europe is nothing short of greatness. You can't argue with that. The 1850 book Representative Men by Ralph Waldo Emerson includes an essay titled Uses of Great Men, wherein he comments on the impact of greatness in our society and how greats come to embody the scope of human nature and potential for growth. No man in all the procession of famous men is reason or illumination or that essence we were looking for, but is an exhibition, in some quarter, of new possibilities. Could we one day complete the immense figure which these flagrant points compose? The study of many individuals leads us to an elemental region wherein the individual is lost, or wherein all touch by their summits. Thought and feeling that break out there cannot be impounded by any fence of personality. This is the key to the power of the greatest men. Their spirit diffuses itself. As such, Napoleon's spirit diffused itself too. By the end of his days, he had been exiled and ended his life in defeat. Yet the stories of what he had achieved shine brighter than the end. The sheer weight of achievement in his early days is highlighted above all else. If anything, the downfall towards the end adds to the greatness because of the human element it applies. Even Napoleon took a loss. Emerson continues in this essay to both explain our obsession for greats as well as highlight the negatives of this obsession. He concedes his inherent like of strong and capable leaders, but prefers those leaders whose position is not venerating the person themselves, but the people with which the person rules. The issue with this is when idealistic leaders do show themselves, they wind up further isolated from their people as their popularity increases. Emerson also believes that we have a natural inclination towards worshipping and getting close to greatness because we believe the greatness will rub off on us. We love to associate with heroic persons, since our receptivity is unlimited, and, with the great, our thoughts and manners easily become great. We are all wise in capacity, though so few in energy. There needs but one wise man in a company and all are wise. So rapid is the contagion. Whether this contagion proves to be true is up for debate. I don't believe those who surround themselves around greatness are necessarily raised by virtue of proximity. In fact, history would often show the opposite. The greats are often surrounded by people that take from them, leading to their downfall. The accumulation of people ignites the dynamite of ego and immortality, often leading to a defeat. When Raskolnikov internally collapsed and confessed his murder, he learned the hard way that the extraordinary man or woman's life is far darker than the romantic narrative we often associate with it. To use a famous example, when Steve Jobs was dying of pancreatic cancer, he left with a chilling warning regarding the psychotic competitive drive he had served, a drive that could work as a blotch test. Some people see the good, others the bad. You make of it what you will, and people often tend to see it very differently. For Jobs, he saw his life as being dominated by chasing things which didn't matter when faced with the arrival of death. I reached the pinnacle of success in the business world. In others' eyes, my life is the epitome of success. However, aside from work, I have little joy. In the end, my wealth is only a fact of life that I am accustomed to. At this moment, lying on my bed and recalling my life, I realise that all the recognition and wealth that I took so much pride in have paled and become meaningless in the face of my death. I just want to point out that the validity of this being penned by Jobs is apparently questionable. Additionally, the quote is too long to fully replicate here, so please click the link I've left in the description and read it for yourselves if you want to get the full thing. Further down in the quote, Jobs highlighted the importance of friends and family. The relentless work ethic and intellect he applied to his life had been a point of pride for the great majority of his years, only to be whittled down to nothing more than a self-aggrandizing delusion when death peered around the corner. Jobs did not disregard the fruits of his labour, however, but he did recognise that he had a small role in his satisfaction with life. In a similar vein, Alexander the Great famously asked to have his wealth spread out upon the trail the pallbearers would take when holding his coffin. As well as this, Alexander wanted his bare hands to hang out the sides of his coffin to demonstrate how he could take none of his wealth along with him to the afterlife. It all begs the question once again of whether it is better to live like a man or woman attempting to achieve greatness, trying to be extraordinary, or to live simply as an ordinary member of the throng. The former garners the glory but individually feels pain. The latter is ignored, maybe even pitied or looked down upon, but lives a clear-headed existence of peace. On average. Raskolnikov would have been better off accepting the ordinary path. His arrogance and ignorance made him believe in a natural-born superiority, as most young men often believe they possess. What he found out was he was not that guy, and the chances are you aren't either. Nevertheless, greatness is something you can chase if you want to. If Napoleon had quelled his ambition with the monumental odds opposing his chances of greatness, he would have never got to where he was. I guess what I'm trying to say is the process itself will teach you what side you fall on, and you have to decide whether you'd like to truly know. There is no wrong or right answer. Just two very different paths to take. Hello, thank you very much for watching the video. You may recognise the voice but likely not my face, as my face is often just hidden behind some sort of animation or public domain footage. I don't know if you probably would have noticed, for people who've been watching since whenever I started, probably like, I think it's like 2021. This video is a little bit different from what I usually do. It was less about lit, more about just like a general topic. Obviously it has more footage of me in here. I've done it once before in the synesthesia video, but obviously this one was a bit more spread out with like footage of me. A bit more of a traditional kind of video, I guess you could say that is. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. I just wanted to also say that I have a Substack, which I've linked in the description. Essentially what it is, I just write weekly. I write like weekly essays on just various things. The greatness video is actually just a reworked Substack article, which I wrote about a month ago. Probably a little bit longer than that. Sometime in, what we in now, May? Sometime in like early April, I think. And yeah, it was just like a reworked kind of essay. And it's stuff like that I'm normally posting every week. As well as that, it's like book recommendations, monthly updates on what's going on behind the scenes of the channel, why I'm not uploading basically, probably because I'm working on a Substack article and it just really breaks up my week. So yeah. If that sounds like anything you'd be interested in, feel free to just give it a, subscribe, follow, whatever they do on Substack. There is a paid option. You don't have to pay. If you do, it's £3.50 a month. So essentially, it's the cheapest I've put it, because I do feel like a cheeky bastard asking for money, and I don't necessarily think I'm deserving of it in regards to the writing. But the option's there. I put it on quite a while ago. I forgot it. I genuinely forgot it was on there. Someone then in January sort of time press the paid option. I was like, oh wow, yeah, great, that's amazing. And so I've had like one person paying us since then. And if you would like to support the work, you're more than welcome to do so. Obviously I'm not going to say no, but you're also more than welcome to go free, because times are tough. I'm not expecting people to fork out for me. That's absolutely fine. However, I would like people to at least just read it, engage, let us know what you think. If you think it's really bad, let me know it's really bad. I'd rather people tell me it's bad, because I get a lot better when I'm told something's really bad. It's much better than writing into a void, which I'm kind of somewhat currently doing. There's the odd person here or there who might like or comment, but mostly it's a void. So go ahead, head down to the Substack, follow it. I'll just kind of, have a look at all the old essays, read them, let me know what you think. Thank you very much for watching.